Hello and welcome to another edition of Caldwell Chats, a series where we like to highlight new and exciting innovators and inspirational innovations along with intellectual property. My name is Leon Grinis and I am a marketing associate here at Caldwell. And let's get into this. So today we have a couple of special guests. We have our very own Katherine Rubino, partner and chair of life sciences. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Leon.
And we have Travis Rappleye from Think Be Squared. Hi, Travis. Nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to be talking about some innovations around program management. I've taken a look at your website and I love the organization. So let's get into it. What is Think Be Squared and what led you to start it?
Think Be Squared is a project and program management consulting firm, and we specialize in early stage med tech startups. Ideally, our sweet spot is somewhere between initial concept and market launch. And we kind of stick in that area once a client gets a commercial approval and commercializes a device. We usually they're going to want to build out project management capability in house, and so we kind of you know uh, do a transition at that point, at usually at commercialization.
Gotcha. So, how did you come up with Think Be Squared? How did this idea come to be?
It I I spent 20 years of my career in med tech startups, and project management, program management is a constant struggle. It's something that is needed. We need to understand timelines. We need to know what we're up against. We need to work through issues. But there's usually not a lot of resources to spend a lot of time on project management, and so it's sort of halfway done. And there's varying degrees of what folks use to manage a project, but it's largely manual. And I just knew that there was a better way. I spent a lot of years in program management, project management as a full time employee at a variety of different startup companies. And knowing what needs to be done and knowing the standard methodology, I just needed some space to invent a new process and a new approach to it. It was there's limitations when I'm a full-time employee of, you're kind of hired to get a job done, and you're moving towards, commercializing a device as quickly as possible with, as little money as possible, and it's just kind of focus on the actual product itself. But I needed some space to experiment with program management and project management methodology and do some things differently. And so I needed to free myself from the constraints of full time work. And the way that I was able to do that is to be, break away and become a full time consultant.
Yeah, that'll do it. Sounds like it was pretty unorganized, so efficiency is a must.
Yes.
Um, So how did you do it? How did you find that free space? How did you find that platform to be able to work on the things that you wanted to do to make it more organized?
It really came down to if I've got a consulting agreement with a contract, and that's how we have, myself and a client have arranged our relationship. It's a lot easier for me to, I guess, to have the influence that I need to do things differently. When I'm an employee of a director of R&D or a VP of R&D or something, usually a lot of those folks have in mind an approach to project management. There's a lot of self-proclaimed project management gurus in industry, and I found myself as a full-time employee kind of doing things the way somebody else wanted me to do them. And if I've got a client consultant relationship with a contract, I have a lot more flexibility to, um, be more. I don't want to say forceful, but be more aggressive about doing things my way, doing things differently. There's a lot more persuasive ability that I have to, convince somebody to do things differently, and take a little bit of a risk on maybe doing, a kind of a stripped down form of project management, which is what I do. I just found that a client consultant relationship it made all the difference in the world for me to have that ability or not.
Gotcha. Um, so pivoting a little bit, can you tell me what role intellectual property plays in your business? And Katie can add on this, I'm sure, as well, too.
As far as my clients go, again, if I get in with a client, often it's my favorite new clients are loan founders who are just starting out. And, one of the first orders of business is to make sure that they've got freedom to operate. And so we spend a lot of time and emphasis up front in making sure that they've got the intellectual property squared away. They've, filed all their provisional patents and really understand their working space and their freedom to operate. And then what I do moving forward is integrate all of the IP timelines into the schedules that I create. So of course, the technical founder is going to want to focus on the invention and the technology, and they may or may not fully appreciate intellectual property, but I help them to bake it in. And usually there's some poor IP attorney who is chasing people around, trying to get their disclosures in on time and convert provisionals to filings, and it's this poor person's doing a very necessary job, but in a lot of cases not getting the attention they deserve. And so what I do is bake the intellectual property timeline into the sort of fun part of the business, which is the invention, so that we keep up on both. Because if if you don't give intellectual property the attention it deserves, then you could be losing just a ton of time and money, and it's worth keeping on top of.
Yeah, Travis, I think that's a great point because I think so much of intellectual property can be very deadline driven. And a lot of times, startups have so many things that they're trying to balance and juggle and pay attention to. And having someone like you who's going to keep on top of it, present it in a very organized manner, and remind them of upcoming deadlines and dates. I think that's just extremely valuable and useful as a tool to very high stage growth startups.
Yeah, yeah, and I keep it proactive. There's so many cases where everybody gets behind on their IP deadlines, and it just stays that way continually. And if if we really are careful about integrating intellectual property tasks and deadlines into the schedule, then we stay proactive about it, and there's so much less stress when you do it that way.
Absolutely. Can you maybe, Travis, tell us a little bit about, and you touched on this earlier, but what really made you become an entrepreneur? Because I think it's just like a very interesting story you have.
Yeah, well, for me, I forget which book it was, but there was a book where you're kind of organizing your life and you're looking at, who you are and who you want to be and things like that. And there was an exercise where I had to write out my future. What was it? Not my obituary, but like write kind of the end of my story and then work backwards. And I was writing out, it's you're I was writing about my future in the present tense, so like it already happened. And I wrote, I made my way up to vice president of R&D or chief operating officer. I did, I'm not CEO. I don't own a business. And as soon as I wrote that, I thought, no, that's wrong. I have it completely wrong. I'm not going to work for somebody else and work my way up. I am going to do my own thing. And that was my moment where I said, finally, admitted, I guess, to myself that this is what I wanted to do. I just the constraints of working for somebody else and doing, you know, um, using a very flawed process and not being able to do anything about it had built up kind of in the back of my mind. And at that moment I realized, okay, no, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go invent something. I'm going to make everybody's life easier. I'm going to come up with a product that is beneficial that nobody has today, and I'm going to have to do it myself, because at 20 years of doing it somebody else's way, I was pretty convinced at that point that it was not going to get any better unless I was more forceful about the whole thing.
So, in terms of promoting your business, has social media played a role um, as a part of that? Has it been helpful?
Limited so far. I like the idea of social media. There are, when I look at social media, when I look at Twitter, when I look at LinkedIn, I see what people are posting. I see people's approaches, and what I I like the idea of social media, but I think in a business context, it's got to be done a certain way. And so for me personally, um, I'm obviously a very social person. I don't have that as a concern for myself. It's content. What I think I want to do when I go to really launch a social media campaign is I want to have a bunch of very informative content all ready to go and a plan for it. And those are things I don't have today. I teach project management at the university in the biomedical engineering program, so you know, I'm right there with my content, developing my course material. And what I want to do, my long term goal, is to take my course material, break it up into logical chunks for social media, whether it's a blog or a series of tweet threads. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to look. Um, Step one would be to get my arms around my content, then break it up into social media chunks, and then launch a social media campaign. So I do have plans for that, but I don't want to go in without a plan and just kind of play it by ear. I want to have kind of those elements in place before I really go forward with social media. But I'm a big believer in it. I think it could be a great way to um, I think for me, the missing piece is what's really important for social media when I think about it is that it's got to be informative. I've got to give something that is easy for people to recognize as, oh, this is important information. This is something I'm not getting from somewhere else. It's not, industry standard. This guy's got something that I want to listen to.
Gotcha. And so, another question: how did you identify a need for project planning in the medtech startup at Katie? I'd love if you can add a bit into this as well.
Sure.
Um,
Go ahead, Travis.
you want me to get started and then you can jump in?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Project management is in a lot of ways in medtech. And I think what frustrated me the most is project management is two parts. There's the planning and then there's the execution. They're different methodologies. They're different thought processes. They're different philosophies, and you do different things when you're planning versus executing. And in medtech startups, you've got you're on venture money or you're on angel money or something, and the clock's ticking, and you don't. I think there's not a lot of emphasis on the planning. There's way more emphasis on the doing, and that leads people to do a lot of extra work, do work in parallel, spend money on things that they're gonna put on pause later, and it's all because of poor planning. And so what I realized is when in medtech startups specifically, I think when people think of project management, they think more of the execution. They want somebody to host all the meetings, keep track of all the to-do items, make sure that everybody's doing what they should. The reporting is there of what's going right and what's going wrong. But that's skipping ahead of the planning part of it. If you plan that out, then it's just execution becomes so much easier. Um, and so that's kind of where I realized that there was a need. I think if I had to boil it down to one idea of a need, it was planning.
Hmm. Yeah. And I'd say, on my side, on the intellectual property side, what I see a lot of sort of these early stage med tech companies doing is a lot of times they'll have inventions in the actual hardware itself, with some sort of new medical device, some type of equipment. And then there's usually almost always some sort of software component too, and figuring out from sort of the very beginning what's the best strategy to sort of protect these innovations. Do they require separate patents? Is there maybe some overlap? Can we protect both with one patent? Really kind of fleshing out what the core of the invention is and coming up with a filing strategy that really makes sense and adds value to what the startup is looking to do as well.
it sounds like the common theme is with what you just said is also planning. It's stopping to say, okay, this is what we're in the middle of. I've got a couple of inventions here besides the big one that I'm thinking about. There are other inventions, and it's just, I think you and I are in sort of in the business of getting people to stop and think at the right times to do what's best for their business long term.
That's right. Exactly.
So, speaking of your business, what are some of your success habits as an entrepreneur? How do you uh, stay motivated? What keeps you motivated?
What keeps me motivated is my successes. There are times where um, being in business by yourself can be a grind, and you can spend a lot of time wondering if you're on the right track or not. But then what keeps me going is I see it working. I see, I'll engage a new client. It really takes me very little time to get them up and running with a very clean, extremely useful schedule, and they are delighted to see the product. It's not, I didn't hire this consultant who's just going to bill a bunch of hours and have nothing to show for it. I can get in and very quickly give them a specific product that's going to improve their life. And when that happens, and I see, over and over again, once again, my idea worked and it made somebody's life easier, and it saved money and time. That's what keeps me going. It every little win convinces me more and more that I'm on the right track, and then I've come up with a product that is um, uh, different than the traditional methodology and specific for the kind of client that I'm looking for, or that I work well with, is early stage med tech startups. I think I've really nailed down a product, and the more I see it succeed, the more convinced I am.
Gotcha. And as a follow up, uh, how do you maintain your mental health as an entrepreneur? How do you stay sane? What is the secret?
Well, the usual suspects are at the top of the list, right? So for me, it's getting enough rest, staying hydrated, getting exercise. I think a big part of, for me personally, I don't sleep well when I'm stressed out. And what helps me to sleep is going on just a really intense long run. I'm a runner. And so I really, it's kind of the nutrition, hydration, exercise, and sleep are all kind of tied together. And so for me, my outlet is running. It gives me a really solid night's sleep, especially if I'm stressed out about something. I can just burn it off on the run. And so that's kind of the standard what you're going to hear from any book, any successful person. But more recently with the pandemic, there's the isolation that I have to worry about, right? I'm working from home. I'm not going to clients' offices as much. I don't personally have a team, and it can get to be very routine. And so what I've done is intentionally kind of, I've never had to do this in my life, but post COVID, um, put myself in social situations, and actually put more of an effort into my social life than I have before, and that keeps me sane in lieu of a a team of people that's working for me, or being having a desk and coworkers and all of that stuff. In the absence of that, my social life has really been a big focus for me, and that's been a big help. um, one odd thing that it was unintentional, but like I said, I lecture in biomedical engineering at the university, and going into class and being able to be in person and see all those eyes looking at me and people interacting, and having that sort of experience has been hugely helpful for my mental health.
Gotcha. I totally hear you on the running. I'm a runner too, and it can
Oh,
definitely
cool.
help 100%. Um, so where do you see Think Be Squared down the road, 5 years?
I want to dominate the space. I think that this is something that I'm working on, how to get my my product more easily recognized by people as something that is different, but they still need it. And once I can kind of get over that hump, I'd like to expand out and just have, be able to offer this to any entrepreneur who's starting a med tech company, and really give them planning tools that they do not have today that they all deserve.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, Travis, a lot of what you said earlier about your own success of Think Be Squared and your own entrepreneurial journey. I think a lot of that success seems to really spill over to your clients once you start working with them and really build these foundational relationships. And I think once they start to see kind of the weight you lift off of them, it just frees them up to really go achieve what they've set out to do as well.
Yes, yes, I convert. Um, a lot of the people, a lot of the founders that I work with don't have experience in the industry, which is great too. But for the ones that do, they can really see, okay, what they thought of it for project management used to be this sort of albatross. It's this, resource consuming, you know, necessary evil. I've got to show my board a timeline, and I've got to show my investors the timeline, and I've got to know when things are going to happen. But beyond that, it's project management, or the schedule specifically, is usually not done very well. People make it way harder than it needs to be, and I think there's a very negative reaction in the industry, to people with experience about timelines and project management in general. And yes, I am spending a lot of time on being careful about my implementation so that people can see how clean and easy it is, and how they can get information that they don't have today. The schedule should take a couple of hours at most a week, unless you have something, a big change, and nobody has a schedule that they would consider complete or accurate. Almost nobody in a med tech startup would say that they've got a complete or accurate schedule, and that's because I think the approach is um, I don't want to say wrong. It's not a good fit for small startups. It's a good fit for the traditional project methodology. Is great for Boeing, who's going to design their 100th airplane, or a construction project or something like that. Um, Innovative medical devices are not the same as each other. They're all different, and traditional methods don't really have a good way to manage a project where you have more unknowns than knowns.
Makes sense. Um, I think also, uh, what would be helpful for aspiring entrepreneurs is if you could tell us some of the mistakes that you've done that you've learned from in this process.
Some of the mistakes that I've done, yes, a big. So going back to, earlier when we were discussing the planning versus the execution, um, a big mistake that I made early on, which was just a continuation of my first couple of clients, were more or less the same thing that I was doing when I got hired full time at my previous employers. I would sign a contract, not really define the work very well, and just start working, and I would jump into the sort of where everybody thinks they have a need, which is executing the project, moving it forward, creating documentation, making sure that I kept track of the thousand things that were in process. Um, and that was a mistake that I made a couple times earlier on, and I learned from that, and have gotten, especially over the last year, way more specific about what I'm doing in a contract, what I'm not doing in a contract going into it. So I spend a lot more time understanding the company, the team, what they really need, writing that into a contract, and having that contract really be specifically focused on the planning. I'm here to help you plan. I'm here to help you strategize. You've got people in place that are technical folks. They're already working. You've already got leaders in place. We're going to let them continue to do what they're doing. And then here's added value is that I am here specifically to help you plan and replan and replan again, which is what we do in medical, in med tech. And we need to, there's usually nobody that's doing that planning and replanning, and okay, well, we learned this. How does that affect everything? And so I really, go to a lot of trouble to outline what my client needs, write that into a contract, and then keep that arrangement moving forward.
Gotcha. Super helpful. Katie, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I think we covered everything we wanted to with you today, Travis. I do have one final question, though, I guess. And
Okay.
that is if someone wants to learn more about you and Think Be Squared, where can they find more information on you?
The best way is in person. Um, I've got a website. It's thinkbsquared.com. It's kind of a good starting place, but you can't really get the whole story from thinkbsquared.com. You can get a little bit of it, but really, where folks are going to learn the value that I can bring is by talking with me. We can spend a couple weeks. What I like to do is sign an NDA, get into somebody's documentation, see what they've got and what they don't have, and then kind of come up with a custom made solution. So I think the best way at the current time, because it's not one size fits all, every company is different, every team is different, every product's different. The best way to learn about Think Be Squared and what Think Be Squared can bring to a business is to contact me directly. Let's get an NDA in place. Let's go through some of what you got and what you don't got, and I'll I can come up with kind of a plan moving forward. And usually that's where myself and a client at the same time can see, okay, we this is where I can bring value. This is what's going to change. This is what's not going to change. This is what I'm going to need from them, right? And we can really see all those details. But again, since a truly innovative device isn't like anything else, it's really hard to put into a web page how I'm gonna serve every case.
Well, you said it, not us, so don't be mad if your mailbox gets flooded. But thank you so much for joining. Thank you guys so much for coming. I've learned a lot um, about management and just the importance of planning. So with that, thank you guys so much, and over and out.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks,
Good talking to you
Leon.
guys.
Thanks, Travis.